My name is Kelton O'Connell. This is Talking Up North. We are joined today by MCCSC Superintendent Dr. Markay Winston. How are you, Dr. Winston?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kelton.
Thanks for being here. I think it was just over a year ago that we last interviewed you here when you were just stepping into the role of interim superintendent. It was a while ago.
And yet it feels like just yesterday.
Yeah. Let's start there then maybe. What's your job looked like? What's that transition looked like from when you started in, was it July of last year?
Yes, July of 24.
So you were counting the days then. I think we're at just over 450 today.
That is probably correct.
I don't know.
I did stop counting after the first couple hundred. I did stop counting.
Sure. So how has your job changed since then?
You know, I would say that, first of all, it's a good question in terms of how it's changed. I think what's changed more than anything is just getting into a rhythm and having a better understanding of what the superintendency entails, all that is required, making sure that I've kind of got my finger on the pulse of every aspect of the school corporation. I think that's what has really resonated for me in terms of what's different. The first 30 days, I didn't really know what to anticipate. I just knew that I needed to assess everything. I really wanted to be a good listener, and I wanted to understand more. Even though I'd been in the corporation for a number of years, when you switch from the chair that I was in to the chair that I'm now in, it's so vastly different. And I don't know that I fully anticipated how different it was going to be. And now that I've been in this chair for, as you indicated, almost 450 days, I enjoy the chair. I enjoy the opportunity to make change. I enjoy the opportunity to get to know more about the school corporation, to understand more of what our students are asking for, what our families are demanding and expecting from our school corporation, and then also figuring out how I can support our teaching staff and our support staff differently. Now that I'm in a different role, I'm better positioned to be more responsive. So I think that's some of what I've learned over this past year and a few months.
Yeah. Do you think the rhythm that you find now has started kind of over the summer when you're like, okay, this is the start of a school year again and it feels familiar, or did you start slowly building that throughout last school year?
I would say the familiarity of opening school feels very familiar.
Good. Yeah.
It's still different in this particular role because you're responsible for everything and all the big things and all the little things and everything in between. And so the weight and the magnitude of the responsibility definitely is very heightened.
You talked last year a lot about your philosophy being coming into that role with a perspective where you really wanted to listen and learn from the community, from your teachers, from your students, and things like that. What have you learned over the last year?
I've learned that listening is a long-forgotten art form in a lot of ways. I've always considered myself a really good listener and one that's very intent because I really want to understand. And so what I've learned, and in many ways probably just reaffirmed more than anything else, having been in the corporation, it was reaffirmed to me how excellent our teaching staff is, how amazingly excellent they are, how well committed they are to making sure that our students get access and opportunities to any and everything that they're interested in. And so I heard a lot about that. I also heard from our teachers how much support they want and need, and how we can do that differently and how we can do that better as administration. I heard from families, they really just want the best for their students. They want to make sure that we are giving them every opportunity, that we are being responsible, that we are being fiscally responsible in terms of being good stewards of the dollars that have been entrusted to us to educate their children. And then I've heard from students that they just want to have good experiences, they want to learn as much, and they want to get prepared for their futures. I've heard from students and I've learned from students that there's a certain degree of anxiousness and anxiety around certain aspects of school and just life in general. And they want to know that as a school system that we're going to support them. And so I feel very fortunate to have had some of those really good conversations, informative conversations from across the board. I've also had an opportunity to talk to community leaders and hear more from them what they think about our schools and what they expect from our schools. So I feel blessed and fortunate to be in those conversations, to have a much better, well-rounded perspective on what is expected of our schools and then my responsibility, how do we deliver on those expectations?
I want to focus on the student part, those conversations that you might have had with students. I'm on this on your Student Voice Advisory Council. Can you tell us some of the conversations and topics that have been covered in that context and outside conversations, maybe just in the halls or when you've been in buildings, things like that?
Absolutely. So first of all, I am so appreciative of the members of the Superintendent Student Voice Advisory Council. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for me to firsthand hear from students what their experiences are, what their passions are, what are they worried about. What I've liked about this past year with the Student Voice Advisory has been their ability to bring different ideas and things and their creativity to suggest, hey, is it possible for us to do something like this? I think it was also during that time period that I heard from some of the Student Voice Advisory members about just some of the anxieties that students are experiencing and facing in school and some of the concerns with what's happening in our society. Being able to put into words what their day-to-day life experiences are. I've also heard suggestions around how we can do a better job. You know, I heard some recommendations around financial literacy and planning and ways in which we can incorporate that a little bit differently. I've heard how can we make sure that students' voices are being heard through the ways in which we communicate more effectively. I think that was one of the suggestions that you and some of your colleagues were suggesting and talking about. And so those are some of the things that I've heard. As I visited schools, what I listen for is I want to know, are you having fun? Are you learning a lot? Are we doing a good job? You know, and I also want to know, what are you learning? And I want to hear whether or not students feel like that what they're learning is going to impact them going forward. And overwhelmingly, the feedback has been positive. You know, now there are some concerns, of course, but I also want to hear the good things. I want to hear that our students are feeling safe in our schools, that they're getting good relationships, you know, with their teachers, with their peers. And those are just a few examples of what I've been hearing as I've been out and about.
You talk about anxiety students might be facing and challenges that students are facing. What are some of the biggest things? I think last year you talked about student engagement, making sure students want to be here, want to engage in classes and extracurriculars and things like that. Do you think that's more or less the same? What are some maybe unexpected things that you've been seeing? What are students facing today?
I think it's a variety of things. In terms of engagement, one of the things I'm really proud of is the fact that we're seeing improvements in our attendance. You know, and to me that says that students are valuing what we're offering. And I know from last school year we were really monitoring what school attendance was looking like and really trying to create more opportunities for students to be engaged. And so as a result of that, there were some additional club offerings and competition offerings provided, and we're seeing more students participate. Students who may not have been participating in any meaningful way in the past are now engaged. For an example, esports is one small example, but it's a big example. It took off probably more than we thought it would. I was approached by a number of students a couple of years ago and said, hey, Dr. Winston, we really like this idea of esports. Is that something that we can do? And when I first learned about it, I was thinking, how am I going to support kids playing games in school? I didn't fully grasp, you know, the magnitude of all that it was. And so initially, I wasn't really supportive of it, but the more they actually did a presentation, researched it, and kind of told me more about how it impacts their learning. They talked about opportunities for scholarships. And so last year was the first year that we put esports into our schools, and it has been overwhelmingly supported by students. And so that's one example. And so some of the students who were participating hadn't particularly been engaged in a lot of ways. So I see the engagement piece being big. I know our teachers have been working really, really hard to strengthen engagement with our students, and they've been monitoring that. So that's an example. I do think that some of our students are struggling with some mental health challenges. I've heard that from them firsthand. I've heard that just because of life circumstances, there are difficulties, and they want to know, who can I talk to? And so I think that making sure that our counselors and our social workers are available and accessible to our students, that's been really important. We partner with different mental health agencies. So I think there's a lot of different ways in which we've been responsive to what our students are telling us.
Specifically for mental health, do you think cell phones have been a big factor in terms of that? And I know the state passed legislation a little bit ago banning them, and has your team looked at kind of the effects of that maybe and what that's looked like?
Yes, it's so funny that you mentioned that. I was just recently talking with members of my team about how is that being impacted. And the good news is I'm not hearing a lot about it. And so the teachers are really taking a hold of that and kind of managing that in the classrooms. And I think our students, from what I'm being told and what I'm hearing, is that the students have been responsive. I think social media is probably one of the biggest factors that's impacting our students' mental health and their sense of safety and security. And so being able to minimize and limit social media activities and things during the school day, I think, is very important for how our students are feeling during the school day.
How about our homeless student population? I think that's kind of a hot button topic at maybe the city and the county level, and as different community leaders have been thinking through that. What's MCCSE's role in supporting students who are facing difficulties like that one at home?
That's a big one, to be very honest with you. And we recognize what's going on in our city and our community and across the state and the country. We do have students who are experiencing, not being housed, and we want to be responsive. We provide supports and services specifically targeting and supporting those children and those families. And we work very closely with our school social workers to make sure that the needs of those students are being addressed each and every day. And so we want to continue to be a good partner with the city, with the local mental health agencies, and with our families, most importantly, to make sure that in spite of the fact that they may be experiencing homelessness and not being housed, we don't want that to limit their access to opportunities, to course offerings, to experiences. And so we put a lot of effort and energy into removing some of those barriers that being unhoused can present.
What do you think your role as superintendent is in the kind of the greater community in Bloomington and in the state?
That's an excellent question. I think that my role is one of being an ambassador, one of being an advocate, one of really speaking to various leaders within our community about the realities of public education. I think I have an obligation and a responsibility to probably have my voice heard even beyond Bloomington. And I know I've been asked to speak at different events and things, whether it's with legislative issues that are impacting public education, whether it's through state organizations and things. It's not really necessarily what I aspire to do, because I feel like my responsibility is right here in Bloomington. But I also recognize that we are a microcosm of what's going on in our society in some ways. And so as a school superintendent, you must step into those roles. And I feel a strong sense of responsibility to make my voice heard, to speak on behalf of the over 10,000 kids that we serve and the thousands of families that are here. And so it's more than a responsibility. I think it's actually a privilege to be able to speak on behalf. And I try to take advantage of that every opportunity that I get.
What are some state legislative things that have impacted MCCSE you think the most?
I think there are so many different pieces of legislation that are impacting us. The one that has been impacting us in most recently has been the Choice Scholarship. And I speak on that because that directly removes dollars from our school system. It allows families to take those dollars to pay for private education. And so that piece of legislation has been in effect for a number of years, but most recently, the salary limitations or the income limitations of families, any family, no matter what their income is, can then take those dollars. The way that's impacting us as a school system is we're losing approximately $5 million a year, between $4 and $5 million a year over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's pretty significant. Those are dollars that are taken away from the children that I'm responsible for educating. Another piece of legislation that is hitting us on a small scale today, but over the next several years is going to impact us pretty significantly, is SEA 1, property tax relief. There's a lot of misunderstanding, I suspect, about what that is and what it's not. But what it is doing is it's really eliminating dollars from public schools, and I think you can look and see that the majority of the public schools in the state of Indiana are going to be impacted one way or the other. It's going to impact us pretty significantly in terms of our ability to continue to deliver all the supports and services that we currently deliver. And so part of our efforts have been to figure out how do we minimize that impact as best as possible. What that means in actual dollars is anywhere from 10 to 20-ish millions of dollars we won't have over the next 3 to 7 years. And so you've got to figure out, how do we continue to operate? How do we continue to deliver the high-quality educational experiences that our children deserve in the absence of some of those dollars? And so that's what we're working very creatively and flexibly to minimize that impact as much as we possibly can. I know that we cannot eliminate that impact, but if I can minimize that over the next few years, and some of the work that we've done already, I think, will be helpful towards that end, but that's not going to be enough. We're going to have to do more. And so those are two specific examples of recent legislation that certainly is impacting our schools. There are others, but those are probably the two highest profile pieces of legislation.
Sure. Does MCCSE have a lobbyist at the state level, or what does the advocacy look like at that, up in the Capitol?
That's actually a great question. And so I am a member of the Urban School Superintendents Association, and so we do have a lobbyist that works on behalf of our schools every day up at the State House, and so that has been helpful. So we meet with them on a pretty regular and consistent basis to make sure that he is aware of the issues that we're facing, so that he also can speak to those issues, and he can make sure that our views are known. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to strengthen the level of advocacy that's happening at the State House as well.
In terms of mitigating impacts on, local impacts for our students, I think that ties into the 2-year financial plan that our district is currently, I think, maybe 7 months into.
7 months in, yes.
Can you tell us, kind of at the beginning, when you first stepped into this role, last year you told me about your fiscal responsibility, making sure that we're handling taxpayer money appropriately. What is that that process of kind of identifying these concerns and realizing this is a kind of a big problem? Like, what was that like for you?
I would say that within my first 30 days of stepping into the superintendency as an interim in July of 2024, one of the very first things I did was I reached out to an organization that works with school systems in looking at finances. Stepping into the role of superintendent gives you access to information that you would never have access to. And so I really wanted to have an objective outside entity to come in and give me an unbiased perspective on the finances. And my ask was, I want you to go back a few years and look, and I want you to also tell me what the future could be, what we might predict in the future. And so in addition to that, working very closely with the budget team here in MCCSE, I really wanted to look at what have our expenditures been, what does payroll look like, how much are we spending a month on payroll? So really looking at everything, looking under every rock. Why are we spending that much money on this area? Well, what about this area? Are there opportunities for us to be more efficient? Can we find some cost savings? What would those cost savings be? And so really taking probably 5 or 6 months to really do a deep dive into all of our finances and getting a better understanding of our historical spending patterns to figure out what would it do if we could alleviate some of that and we could find some financial efficiencies. And so that's really, when I walked into the role, the biggest surprise was undertaking that.
Were you expecting to play such a big role in your job?
Not right off the bat. I knew it would play a role,
Sure.
but I didn't know that it would be as significant so soon.
Yeah.
And yet I feel fortunate that the board entrusted me to take that on and to tackle that. And then once I had a better understanding and was beginning to get my arms around it, the next challenge was, how do you message this? How do you message this to our community? How do you make good decisions? And so what we had to look at was the most obvious piece of that was our enrollment has declined. And from the year before COVID to that point in time, we had lost about 800 kids, between 800 and 900 kids. And so every individual student in our school system, based on the way the state tuition dollars work, generates a certain dollar amount, approximately $7,414 to be exact, because I have spent a lot of time studying it, and it's kind of weird that I would know that number. But I do, out of necessity, because I need to understand. You need to have a superintendent who understands the finances.
There's a lot of moving pieces, I'm sure.
There are so many moving pieces. Yeah. And what I think is really critical is you have to be a superintendent who is both an educational leader and a financial manager. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces that I've really had to embrace faster than I thought I would. And so in doing that, we did come up with a 2-year strategy. And that initial 2-year strategy was really just to help us manage the declining enrollment and getting our arms around our staffing levels and our enrollment numbers, just so that we could be ready for whatever new legislation might be coming. And that was well before we even knew anything about SCA 1.
Right.
And so you're right, we're 7 months in to a 24-month strategy. I'm very encouraged. I feel like we've made a lot of good progress. I recognize it's requiring us to work different, and it's requiring us to work smarter and more efficiently. But I feel very confident that it was absolutely the right thing to do at the right time. Now, nobody would ever want to do that in their first year of a superintendency. That's not what you desire to do.
Wasn't on your wish list.
It was not on my wish list. It wasn't even on my radar. And yet, my responsibility is to make sure that this organization is fiscally sound into the future, and that's what I'm going to do.
What are some of the toughest decisions you've had to make since February?
I think the toughest decisions have been to not replace positions. If somebody were to retire or to resign and move on, it's been tough to make the decision, like, not going to fill that position, at least not right now. I think the toughest of those decisions has been, when we needed to lay off some positions as well. We recognized that we had a number of positions that had just kind of been lingering on since COVID days. And it was a nice to have, but it was not a must have. And so helping folks make the distinction between a nice to have versus a must have is not an easy thing to do. And so I would say those have been the toughest choices I've had to make in the last 7 months.
Have class sizes been increasing as a result of some of these changes in the schools?
I appreciate that you asked that question. I spend a lot of time every week looking at every classroom in this corporation. I would say that our class sizes have increased a little bit, but not substantially, not the way you might anticipate. When you think about the fact that our enrollment has declined by over 900 students in 5 years, and our staffing levels didn't. Mm-hmm. So we were actually sitting kind of pretty with our class sizes, and we look at it from an average class size. And so in many ways, our class size numbers were very optimal, and we compared ourselves to other school corporations of our size, and we also compared our class size numbers to other corporations within our area. And even before these changes, our class size numbers were good, and even now, after we've made these staffing changes, our class size numbers are still better than everybody else's. So from that perspective, I feel encouraged. Nobody wants to increase class sizes, but the good news is I don't see significantly high class sizes, and I've looked at every classroom in this corporation, and my HR team, that's their number one assignment, is to monitor class sizes and to make sure that we're not asking teachers to have 40 and 50 kids in their classrooms. I think one of the classrooms that I did see, I think I saw a sixth grade class that might have had 31 students in it, which that's still reasonable, but it's not preferable.
Is there like an industry standard for what the ideal range is, or
There's not necessarily an industry standard, but I mean, there are expectations and what is reasonable. You know, nobody wants to see a kindergarten class, for example, with 30 kids in it. Unfortunately, we don't have any kindergarten classrooms with 30 kids in it that have been brought to my attention.
Sure.
We don't have exceedingly high numbers, but we certainly have higher numbers than what we've been accustomed to by having fewer kids in our classrooms. And so I think the takeaway is we're monitoring it very closely. I've got staff members who actually go out into classrooms and in schools and are counting the numbers of kids in classrooms to make sure, you know, I said, I want to be certain that we are not asking our teachers to do more than what's expected or what's reasonable. I understand the concerns that our teachers are bringing about class sizes, but we are very closely monitoring that, and our principals know if there's ever a situation that they see where, hey, our class sizes are off the charts, all they have to do is let our assistant superintendent for HR know, and we will certainly be looking into that. So I'm very confident and comfortable with where we are in that regard.
How different is the evaluation of class sizes in elementary compared to the secondary levels?
I would say that there are different standards. I mean,
Sure.
we recognize, like, when children are learning to read, we want our teachers to have manageable class sizes so that they can provide the instruction that's necessary. I think having 25 kids in an elementary classroom is very different than having 25 students in a high school classroom. And so just being cognizant of that and being thoughtful about the developmental differences that exist between an elementary student and a high school student. So we take all of that into consideration.
Let's talk briefly about MCCSC's new online school.
Yes.
So that was launched over the summer, and I think last I heard our enrollment is at about just over 50 students. Is that right?
We're between 48 and 52.
Okay.
So yes.
Do you know what well, let me ask you this first. How does the online school impact the fiscal situation?
Great question. So there are a couple of different ways in which you can participate online. At the high school level, we've allowed high school students to participate part-time online, part-time in person. And if it's like a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, when they do that, then we get full funding.
Okay.
So we get the full $7,414. If they are full-time online, then we get 85% of that.
Okay.
And so that's the difference. And so I don't remember the breakdown in terms of that 48 to 50 kids, what percentage of them are full-time online and what percentage of them are what we call hybrid.
Okay.
Partial in person,
Right.
partial online.
And then are elementary kids all online?
They're
There's
all
no
online.
Hybrid option there.
Yeah, we haven't provided a hybrid option for the elementary students. The majority of the students that are participating are high school.
Okay.
You know,
yeah,
I
because
think
I think for the added flexibility and
Absolutely. I think we might
Yeah.
have maybe 8 to 10 at the elementary level. So
do you know if the online program is drawing students? I guess there's two places students could come from, right? One is from, let's say I go to North right now and I say, this isn't for me. I need some more flexibility, so I transfer to the online school. Mm-hmm. The other one might be maybe I was never enrolled in MCCSC and I was with a different online school, whether that's a private school or another public online school in Indiana, and then MCCSC isn't receiving that enrollment even though I live in Monroe County. Do you know kind of what the breakdown of that would be?
yes, and in fact, that's the reason why we created it in the first place is we had heard from our families that they wanted this kind of an option for their children. And so we've heard that for a couple of years, and we felt a strong sense of responsibility and obligation to provide that. Some of those families had opted for an online program someplace else because we didn't have that. Mm-hmm. And so for many of those families, once they learned of our willingness to open that up, they came home,
Right.
so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah. And so they're like, well, you guys are doing an online? Oh, well, yes, I want to do that. And so we have a number of families who are participating online who might have been on homeschool. Mm-hmm. We have a number of families who are participating online now because they were at another online program. And now they're like, well, if there's one right here in my backyard, we'd like to participate. Mm-hmm. And then I think the third category is we do have some students. We have a handful of students who are physically in person with us in our schools. and they still wanted an online option. And so we've been responsive to that as well.
Do you know of any students maybe who are not within Monroe County boundaries who have taken advantage of our program?
I don't know offhand, but I
Okay.
could certainly ask Dr. Dowling.
Yeah,
I'm sure he knows.
Is that a hope maybe that we can draw in students from outside of our
Yes, it
boundaries?
is. It absolutely is. And we suspect that maybe within the next year, as we get to be more known for having this option, I mean, we rolled it out a little bit late. It was in July that we
Yeah.
rolled this out. And so there are some families who are like, oh, I didn't know about this, maybe next year.
Sure.
And so I'm hopeful that other families will take advantage of that, going forward.
How are we measuring the success of the school? Was around 50 kind of what we were expecting, or?
To be honest with you, Kelton, I was going to be satisfied if we only had 25 because it's not about setting the bar low, but I thought, okay, it's July. We're
a
just
new
now
program.
kicking off. It's brand new.
Yeah.
If we get 25 year one, I would be satisfied. And so now as I think about, having 50, I mean, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And then thinking about, well, what would our goal look like for next year? I would see if we could accomplish 75 to 100 next year, I think that would be a success as well. And hopefully there will be families from other school corporations who see this as a viable option.
Yeah.
We have some features in how we're doing online that other folks aren't doing, such as being able to participate in athletics and extracurricular activities. A lot of online schools don't have that option available, and so that's one thing that distinguishes us from some of the others.
Let's talk about elementary schools. I know there's a study commission that's currently happening where they're looking at different scenarios for how we can redraw the attendance catchment zones for our elementary schools. What might maybe the fiscal effects be of that?
That is another one of those big initiatives that new superintendents may not always seek out, but I do think we're looking forward to understanding what the commission is learning. And so I think it was important for us to establish it as a redistricting study commission because before the school board would make any kind of decision, I would want the school board and myself to fully understand and have a good grasp of what are all the factors, what are all the considerations that must be thought about. And in terms of where we're going with that, I do think that there is a great likelihood to have a positive impact on our finances. I think given the financial realities of the property tax reform, given the realities of reduced enrollment, and Preston Smith has projected that our enrollment is going to continue to decline because of demographic factors specific to Bloomington and Monroe County. All of those factors can't be denied. We have to pay attention to that. And so if there's an opportunity for us to give some consideration to what role redistricting might play in that, I do think it was a very responsible move and a prudent move on the behalf of the school board to say, let's study this, as opposed to making knee-jerk decisions without all of the information. And so hopefully there will be some good feedback that will come from this that will help the school board make some determinations as to how do we move forward.
Something else Preston Smith said in his report to the board was that MCCSE has an extraordinarily high number of transfers between schools within the district where kids aren't attending the school that they're districted for. I'm districted for South. I go to North. Is that
I got to fix that.
is that a problem, and why, and maybe what might be done about it?
I appreciate you asking that question. We do consider ourselves to be a school system of choice, and when we've looked at that data, he's not wrong in terms of there are a number of circumstances where students make requests to transfer to a different school. And families have the right to explore that. As we think about that, I think our numbers are anywhere from 18 to 20% of our students may transfer to a school that's not in their neighborhood. And so we want to be responsive to that. We are certainly studying that. I think that's also part of what the Redistricting Study Commission is going to pay attention to and looking at some of that data. I think they've already begun to look at some of that data over the summertime to get a better understanding of what are the implications of that. And so I would anticipate that we will take a closer look at our transfer policy and see if there are some opportunities for us to think about how do we want to apply that. We don't want to limit family choice. We recognize the value of families being able to make informed decisions on behalf of their children. And so we want to figure out the balance of that, recognizing that we can't have everybody transferring,
Right.
but at the same time, are there certain circumstances under which we could be much more supportive of families exercising that choice?
Got it.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I do want to ask you about the Herald Times building that the district purchased. Is there a plan for how that's being used? If I were to walk in there right now, what would I see?
Great question. That's been a really important topic. And currently, when the building was purchased, I believe it was purchased in 2022. I think it's been at least 3 years.
Okay.
And I think there were a lot of different ideas about how it would be utilized. One of the ideas that I know originated several years ago was for it to become a family welcome center, to be able to have a central location where families could come and enroll and register and get access to supports and services. That never has materialized. So if you were to walk into the HT building today, what you would see is you would see a lot of equipment, you would see extra desks, you would see materials. So it's kind of being used for storage.
Is there anyone working there right now?
There's no one physically in the building every day, all day long.
Okay.
No, but it is used by the facilities team
Got it.
to store extra equipment, materials, furniture, you name it. Things are so it's actually there's a lot of stuff there.
Sure. And school buses.
And then the parking lot is full of school buses, and so it has fulfilled a need for storage. That's been a shortage of the school corporation in recent years. Is where do you put all these things?
Okay.
And so it has been used for storage. The decision on the future uses of that building will be determined by the school board in terms of next steps. And so I am in conversation with the school board, and I'm eager to hear what direction they want us to go. And so they'll let me know what they would want me to do with that building.
I have one more question about the financial stuff. I think as a student here, and I think I speak for some of my peers too, we feel some additional stress from our teachers. We see them stressed. We see them a little bit concerned about what's ahead. How do you have to make these tough decisions. You have to deal with what you're given. How do you, at the same time, though, support your employees, support your teachers, and keep morale as high as it can be?
That is such an excellent question. I was literally just talking with somebody yesterday, one of our employees in our employee groups, and they were kind of lamenting the fact that there are fewer people doing the work that person did. And I said, well, how's morale? He said, well, it varies. I think a part of that, dealing with that and supporting it, is open dialogue. I think helping folks to understand, asking questions, and really listening to figure out, well, what can we do? How can we minimize the stress and the pressure that our employee groups are experiencing? How can we be supportive? What does that system of support need to look like? And I think continuing to keep the lines of communication open has got to be a part of that process.
Do you think that exists right now, open communication?
I feel like it does. I think it can be better. I know that my team and I are working diligently to communicate as often and as effectively as possible, and yet I feel like it's never enough. I feel like there are still some opportunities to have more two-way conversations. I do want to hear more firsthand from teachers about, tell me what it feels like, tell me what I need to know and understand, which is why I try to get out to schools and listen and talk to teachers. I like to talk to our support staff. They've been hit the hardest in many ways. And so wanting to make sure that I understand them, but I also want to make sure that they understand the realities that we're facing when we look at our enrollment numbers and how that's impacting our overall finances. We all have to be a part of the solution of how do we recruit kids to come back. Now part of it is families are literally moving out of Bloomington. And other part of it is they're making different choices. And so it can't just be Dr. Winston's responsibility to try to bring students back. We've lost about 900 kids. I don't think we're going to get 900 kids back, but what we do each and every day influences the choices that our families make. And so in terms of the dialogue, I would like more dialogue. I would like to have more opportunities to listen to teachers and to understand and to figure out what can I do differently. If our teachers have suggestions, we meet with the teachers union on a monthly basis. I don't personally, but members of my team do, for the purposes of understanding and to hear their ideas. And so I'm continuing to be open to suggestions and ideas about how we support our teachers, how we support our support staff differently and better.
I have two questions that I'm going to ask together.
Okay.
The first is, where do you see MCCSE in 5 years?
Okay.
And then the second is, where do you see education, both public and generally, in 10 years?
Wow. Great questions. If only I had a crystal ball. I really do believe that public education as a whole is at a crossroads. What we know about public education today is going to look very differently in 10 years. So let me kind of start there. I think it's going to be different, but I think that as the funding mechanisms change, because let's be frank, that's what's different. The dollars that have traditionally been available to public schools to educate public school children are changing, and they're being diverted to different places. And so I think that the future, I don't know what that's going to look like in 10 years. It's a little scary sometimes when I think about it, to be very honest with you and to be very transparent. And yet what I know about our community is that we're going to continue to double down and deliver the best services. There's no school system that does what we do. There's no school system that delivers the quality experiences and instruction and opportunities to learn and to explore like MCCSE does. And so I believe that our future is rich. I feel that it's very positive, and I think how we navigate the next 2 to 3 years is really going to position us to continue to be at the forefront of all that we already are. And so in 5 years, I think we are going to absolutely be the school corporation of choice. I think folks are going to see that we have weathered this storm, the financial storm, because as public educators, we figure stuff out. We respond, and there's never been a time in the course of public schools and public education that we haven't gotten through the crisis, the financial crisis that was in front of us. And so we're going to be better, and I think we're going to be still at the forefront, and we're still going to have amazing students who are doing incredible things and going on to succeed. And I think we're going to continue to make sure that in spite of the noise that's out there, our students are still going to be at the top of the ladder. And so I feel that very, very strongly. And I feel a strong sense of responsibility to get it right the next couple of years so that we are well positioned.
What does the rest of your week look like?
Let's see, what's today, Tuesday? So tomorrow I have to go to Indianapolis and go to a superintendent meeting.
Okay.
To hear more news about what's going on in the state and the country.
That's exciting.
It is. The most exciting part of my week this week is I have my first student voice advisory meeting for the school year, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then I'll be meeting. I'll do some events in the evenings. I'll probably go to the City Hall City Council meeting tomorrow evening to hear what their budgets are going to look like, because I think we're all in the same boat. And then, of course, I'll be visiting a few schools. So I've got a number of things going on the rest of the week. It's a great question, too.
Okay. Do you have anything else for us?
No, I just want to say thank you. I think your questions were right on point. they speak to things that are near and dear to my heart, and I just appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.